You know, I don't think there's anything quite as good and as natural as being raised on a farm. Uh, that may be because that's the only life I was raised under, but there's a lot of reasons why I think that. There's just not anything quite like it. Dad is there all the time. You work with him every day. Uh, the boys, at least, work hand in hand with their dad on a daily basis. Oh yeah, sometimes they're out on a tractor and dad's irrigating or something like that, but everything, the focus is always together. And it was a wonderful thing. And when you think about it, your father really becomes the rock. He is the foundation of your life. Your mother too, for sure. But dad, because he's right there, becomes a bigger part of it than usually would be. And the boys work hand in hand with their father. He becomes the rock and foundation of your whole life. You eat every meal, laugh, fight, and pray together. And I think that's such an important thing. Um, we felt like that it was our responsibility, Dave and I, to make sure that our sister uh, was dating the people that we wanted her to date. If she dated someone that we didn't particularly like or want her to date, we would we would take care of the situation. And she was 3 years older than me, and that was Aunt Nola. And she was very attractive, and all the guys wanted to date her. Well, there are some guys that we wanted her to date, but there's some that we didn't want her to have anything to do with. I was only 10, 11 years old, and she started dating now and then when she was 14, so that's about right. And I remember one time a guy asked her out, and he had this real shiny black Ford coupe. And he wasn't one of those that we wanted her to go with. He was from Preston, and we thought that he probably didn't have the best uh, things in mind, if you want to put it that way. And so we went to the back side of the house with some tomatoes and threw the tomatoes up over the house and down on his shiny black car. Well, he never came back, ever, never. And then another thing we did is she was had a date with somebody that we didn't particularly want her to go with, and we had little Richard, who was 5.5, 6 years younger than me, and so he was just a little kid. But we had him in the night a hold of a hose, hiding behind something. I can't remember what was there, maybe behind a tree. And when Nola and her date came to the doorstep, he just uh, signaled to us, and we turned the hose on, and it had a sprayer, and he just sit there and sprayed them up and down, up and down, up and down. Well, he got them mighty wet. Well, I don't think that guy showed up again either. And there was a there was a number of young men that we really liked that we became good friends with. But another one came along, and he was one of those, and we didn't know quite what to do with him. We started getting a kind of a reputation. I don't know how it started, but he came in and he was there right up until bedtime. And so it was time for us all to go to bed. And Dad said, "Let's have prayer." And so we all knelt down. We knew what that was about. And this young man just didn't know quite what to do, whether he should join us or just stay seated. And Dad invited him to join us, and he knelt down. And then Dad called on him to pray. That was a struggling prayer. Maybe not exactly what a person should do to scare off a suitor, but he never showed up again either. I don't know how Nola made it through there, but when she finally came across Dan, we were all cheering. We thought that was a great connection. And Dan let me borrow his motorcycle. In fact, he insisted that I borrow it. I'd never driven one before. And he insisted that I get on it and ride it. He said, it's very simple. It's just one down with your foot on the gear shift and two up, two or three, two, I think. One down and two up, three gears. I don't know, something like that. Anyway, he climbed on behind me and I got on there and I was really nervous because I'd never ridden a bike before and it was kind of a new experience and I didn't know quite what to think. And he was sitting on the bike behind me and I revved it up and popped the clutch and we just fired right out from under him. So he was left sitting on the ground and I went zooming along and it took me a minute just to get control of the bike. And when I had control of the bike, I was down the road a little bit and it was roaring like crazy. So I thought, okay, one down. I went one down and I did two up and I was getting the hang of it. And I got down to the end of the mile marker and turned right on a road that goes another mile, and then turned right on a road that went another mile, and then turned right on a road that came right back to our house. However, halfway down that road, I saw my friend out in the yard with his mother, and they had just barely prepared a fairly large piece of ground for a lawn. And I wanted to say hi to him, but I didn't want to look like I didn't know what I was doing. So I turned into his yard fairly fast. And I drove up to where this new lawn or this new project was. And I didn't want to act like I didn't know what I was doing. So I was just going to pull up and stop kind of fast and rev the motor, and look pretty sharp. And what happened is I got right up to the grass and I got everything mixed up and I cranked down on the gas and that thing jumped right out in the middle of that grass. That it was all wet and all flat and ready. They just were leaning on their shovels and hoes and they were just so glad that they were through. And I lit in the middle of that. Then I hit the gas again and the wheel started spinning and throwing mud everywhere. And it would go around and around in circles. And I was trying to get my foot down. I couldn't even tell what was causing the wheels to spin. I didn't have that much experience. And I was going around and around in circles and making my way at the same time across the lawn area, the new lawn area. And finally, the thing tipped over and I stood up just covered with mud, grabbed the handlebars and dragged it back across this newly prepared muddy area onto the driveway. And I looked over at them and the mother just dropped her head and just walked off to the house. And my friend looked at me and he had this kind of a grin, but not a favorable grin. Don't know how in the world he did that. I've never seen it before, but he wasn't very happy. And I climbed back on the muddy bike and drove it home. And when I got there, I kicked the kickstand down and parked it and walked over to the house. And Dan was just coming out. He looked at me all covered with mud and he says, "Where you been?" I tried to explain it to him why his motorcycle was so muddy. And he says, "No problem." Took it over and washed it off with the hose. Didn't even require me to do it. He just did it. What an amazing man. Always loved Dan. We've had a lot of good times together. And anyway, we always protect. One young man brought her home and it was still daytime and they were parked out in front of the house. And I walked out there and they rolled down the window and I said to the young man, "I know what you've been doing, and I'm not very happy with it." And it was meant kind of as a joke, but he didn't take it as a joke. He crawled right over her lap without any mercy whatsoever, opened the door and chased me clear out around the potato pit. When he found out he couldn't catch me, why, he went back and tried to get Nola to come out of the house. And she was locked herself in her bedroom and said, no, I'm not going to have anything to do with you. And he went home and they never went out again. Oh, we were effective, just so effective. I was just proud to be there for my sister, because